Just 1 minute ago, a storm erupted behind palace walls, and at the center of it all is King Charles III, reportedly furious over what insiders are calling a growing crisis involving his grandchildren, Archie Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Diana. But this isn't just another royal disagreement. According to emerging reports, Charles is no longer staying silent. Sources claim he's now demanding immediate action and possibly even urging that the children return to the United Kingdom, a move that, if true, could ignite one of the most explosive royal confrontations in years, because standing on the other side of this growing tension are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, a couple who have already distanced themselves from royal life in ways no one expected. So what exactly triggered this sudden escalation? Why is Charles reportedly stepping in now? And what does this mean for Archie and Lilibet, two children caught between royal duty and a very different life across the ocean? Because behind the headlines, something deeper is unfolding. And this is where the real story begins. The situation didn't explode overnight. In fact, it had been quietly building for months, perhaps even years, before reaching this boiling point. Ever since Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped back from royal duties and relocated to the United States, their children, Archie and Lilibet, have been raised largely outside the traditional royal framework. No palace routines, no formal royal exposure, no direct involvement in the structured life that defines the monarchy. At first, this distance was seen as temporary. Then, it became permanent. But what truly began to concern royal insiders was how little access the rest of the royal family, especially King Charles III, had to the children. Reports suggest that Charles had hoped to maintain a meaningful relationship with his grandchildren despite the geographical and emotional distance. However, those hopes have reportedly been tested time and time again. Limited visits, controlled interactions, carefully managed communication, and then something shifted. According to palace insiders, recent developments surrounding Archie and Lilibet's upbringing sparked alarm behind closed doors. Concerns began circulating, not publicly, but within royal circles, about their environment, their connection to their heritage, and their long-term place within the monarchy. But what happened next shocked everyone. Sources claim Charles began receiving updates that painted a troubling picture, not necessarily of danger, but of growing detachment, a sense that the children were becoming increasingly disconnected from their royal identity. And for a monarch who has spent his entire life preserving tradition, that's not a small issue. That's when things took a dramatic turn. Insiders say Charles didn't just express concern, he reacted strongly. Strongly enough that discussions within palace walls reportedly escalated from concern to urgency. Because this wasn't just about family anymore, it was about legacy. And according to those close to the situation, Charles began to feel that time was running out to correct what he saw as a widening divide. However, behind the scenes, something else was unfolding. Harry and Meghan, by all accounts, have remained firm in their choices. Their life in California is built on independence, privacy, and a break from royal expectations. And when it comes to their children, they've made it clear they want them raised on their own terms, which sets the stage for a direct clash. A grandfather determined to protect tradition, and parents determined to redefine it. And this is where everything starts to unravel. As tensions quietly intensified, new details began to emerge, details that transformed a private family concern into a full-blown royal controversy. Behind palace doors, insiders claim that King Charles III became increasingly frustrated, not just with the situation, but with what he reportedly viewed as a lack of compromise. Because from his perspective, this wasn't just about occasional visits or family updates. It was about presence, consistency, connection, and according to multiple reports, that connection was slipping away. But that wasn't the only issue. That's when things took an even more dramatic turn. Sources began suggesting that Charles had been advised informally, but seriously, about the long-term implications of Archie and Lilibet growing up completely outside royal influence. Not just socially, but institutionally. Questions began to surface. Would they understand their place in history? Would they have any meaningful relationship with the monarchy? Or would they become permanent outsiders to a system they were born into? However, behind the scenes, something even more sensitive was unfolding. There were whispers, unconfirmed, but persistent, that Charles was deeply concerned about how the children's current environment might shape their future identity. Not in a critical sense, but in a protective one. And this is where the situation becomes far more complex, because to Harry and Meghan, this life is intentional. They've publicly emphasized independence, personal freedom, and distance from royal pressures. For them, raising Archie and Lilibet outside the monarchy isn't a problem, it's the solution. But from Charles's point of view, that same decision could be seen as a loss of connection, a loss of tradition, a loss of continuity. And according to insiders, that's when Charles made his position unmistakably clear. He wants change. Now. But what happened next shocked everyone. Reports suggest that Charles's response wasn't just emotional, it was decisive. Conversations reportedly shifted toward the idea of bringing Archie and Lilibet back to the UK more regularly or even more permanently. A suggestion that, if true, would represent a major escalation, because it directly challenges the autonomy Harry and Meghan have fought to maintain, and this is where the real tension explodes. Sources indicate that any such move would likely be met with resistance, strong resistance from the Sussexes. After all, their departure from royal life was built on the promise of independence, so the idea of returning, even partially, raises serious questions. Would Harry agree? Would Meghan accept it? Or would this deepen an already fractured relationship? However, behind the headlines, another layer adds even more pressure: public perception. Because while much of this drama remains behind closed doors, the narrative is beginning to leak, and with every new report, public interest and scrutiny grows. Some see Charles as a concerned grandfather trying to protect his family's legacy. Others see Harry and Meghan as parents simply choosing what's best for their children. And in the middle of it all are Archie and Lilibet, too young to understand the storm surrounding them. But here's the part no one saw coming. Insiders now claim that this situation could have long-term consequences, not just for family relationships, but for the structure of the monarchy itself. Because if the next generation grows up disconnected, what does that mean for the future? And that question changes everything. The fallout from this growing crisis is already beginning to take shape, and it's far more significant than many initially expected. Within royal circles, the tension has reportedly created a quiet but undeniable divide. On one side stands King Charles III, focused on continuity, tradition, and preserving the monarchy's long-term future. On the other side are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, firmly committed to a life built outside those very expectations. And neither side appears ready to step back. But what happened next added even more pressure. As reports of Charles's concerns and alleged demands began circulating, public reaction quickly followed. Debate intensified across media platforms, with opinions sharply divided. Some believe Charles is acting out of genuine concern for both his grandchildren and the institution he represents. Others argue that Harry and Meghan have every right to raise their children away from royal influence. And this divide isn't just external, it's deeply personal. Because at its core, this isn't just about monarchy or legacy. It's about family, a grandfather who wants to be present, a son who chose a different path, and two children at the center of a situation they never asked to be part of. However, behind the scenes, the long-term consequences are already being considered. If this standoff continues, it could further strain relationships that are already fragile. Communication could become even more limited. Trust already tested could erode even further. And perhaps most significantly, the distance between Archie, Lilibet, and the rest of the royal family could become permanent. But here's the part that lingers. Nothing has been officially confirmed. No public statements, no direct responses, just a growing wave of reports, insider claims, and rising tension. And yet the impact is real, because whether or not Archie and Lilibet ever return to the UK, whether or not Charles's reported demands lead to action, one thing is already clear. The divide within this family is no longer quiet, it's no longer distant, it's now impossible to ignore. And as this story continues to unfold, one question remains at the center of it all. Will this be the moment that finally brings the family back together, or the moment that pushes them even further apart for good?